My name is Sarah, and this happened during my second year of college, a few weeks before Thanksgiving. I still have trouble talking about it in detail, mostly because for a long time, nobody believed me. Even when the police got involved, even when my parents came home early, even after everything that was found in that house, there were still people who acted like I had just scared myself into imagining things. I know what I heard, and I know I was not alone in that house. At the time, I was living with my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those neighborhoods that always felt safe in a boring, predictable way. Small front lawns, two-car driveways, porch lights left on all night. The kind of place where people walked their dogs after dinner and waved at each other from across the street. Nothing ever happened there. That's part of why I ignored the first few signs. My parents had gone out of town for 3 days to visit my aunt in Michigan, which left me alone in the house for the weekend. I didn't mind. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. I had classes during the day, a shift at a coffee shop on Saturday, and the rest of the time I planned to stay home, order food, and enjoy having the place to myself. The first night was completely normal. I stayed up later than I should have, sitting in bed with my laptop open, half watching videos and half pretending to study. Around midnight, I turned everything off, plugged my phone in, and tried to sleep. That was when I heard it for the first time. A sound directly above my room. At first it was so faint I thought I imagined it. Just a soft creak, like old wood settling. My room was on the second floor and right above it was the attic. I remember staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening, waiting to hear it again. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then I heard it. One slow, careful footstep. Then another. I sat up in bed immediately. The sound was too deliberate to be the house settling. It was slow, measured, like someone trying not to make noise while walking across old boards. I told myself it had to be an animal, a raccoon maybe, or a squirrel. Something must have found its way into the attic. That explanation made sense and I clung to it because the other possibility was something I didn't even want to think about. Still, I kept listening. For the next minute or two, I heard light movement overhead. Not constant, just enough to make it impossible to ignore. A small step, then silence. A faint dragging sound, then another pause. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I had almost convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. In daylight, everything feels less serious, less threatening. I went downstairs, made coffee, got ready for class, and tried to shake off the weird feeling that had followed me out of bed. But when I opened the fridge to grab creamer, I noticed something that made me stop. The carton of milk was sitting on the wrong shelf. That probably sounds stupid, but I knew where it was supposed to be. My mom always kept it on the top shelf near the back, and now it was in the door compartment. At first I thought maybe I had moved it the night before and forgotten. Then I saw the cereal box on the counter. I definitely hadn't left that there. I stood in the kitchen for a few seconds just staring at it, trying to remember if I'd made a late-night snack and somehow blocked it out. I was tired enough that it almost felt possible. Almost. But the uneasy feeling from the night before came back immediately. I looked around the kitchen, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. Nothing seemed obviously wrong. No broken window, no open door, no sign that anyone had been there. So I did what most people probably would have done. I ignored it. I went to class, came back in the afternoon, and told myself I was being dramatic. I even laughed at myself once or twice for getting creeped out over attic noises and a moved milk carton. That night, though, things got worse. A lot worse. I was in my room again, lying in bed and scrolling through my phone, when I heard the sound overhead for the second time. Only this time it was louder, not just footsteps, a dragging sound. Slow, heavy, like something being pulled across the attic floor directly above my ceiling. I froze and looked up. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. I sat there staring at the ceiling, waiting, barely even breathing. A few seconds later, I heard 3 soft knocks from above me. 3, evenly spaced. My entire body went cold. Because animals don't knock. For the next few seconds, I didn't move. I just sat there on my bed, staring up at the ceiling in the dark. The 3 knocks had been slow and deliberate, not random scratching, not the sound of something running around. It sounded like someone tapping. I remember whispering to myself, "It's just an animal." But the truth was, I didn't believe it anymore. Animals don't knock, and they definitely don't drag something heavy across the attic floor. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The bright beam lit up the ceiling above me, but of course there was nothing to see. Just the same white paint and faint cracks that had always been there. The house went completely silent again. For almost a full minute, nothing happened. Then I heard another slow step above my room. I felt my chest tighten. The sound moved across the ceiling slowly, like someone pacing. Step, pause, step, pause. Each movement creaked through the wood above me. Whoever, or whatever, was up there wasn't trying very hard to hide it anymore. I slid out of bed and walked quietly to my bedroom door. Part of me wanted to ignore it and pretend I didn't hear anything. But another part of me knew there was no way I could sleep with those sounds continuing over my head. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The second floor of the house was dark, except for the faint glow of a nightlight near the stairs. The attic entrance was in the hallway ceiling, about 10 feet from my room. It was one of those pull-down ladder doors. The kind you grab with a hook and pull open so the ladder drops down. I stood there staring at it, completely still, listening. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, another creak above, directly over the attic floor. I slowly stepped closer to the ladder door. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could feel it in my throat. "Hello?" I called quietly. No answer. The house remained silent. I stood there for another 10 seconds before letting out a nervous laugh. "Great," I muttered to myself. "There's a raccoon living in our attic." Saying it out loud made it sound more believable. I turned around and started walking back toward my bedroom. And that's when I heard it again. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Very faint. Directly above the attic door. I froze instantly. The breathing lasted only a second or two before it stopped completely. But it was enough. Every instinct in my body told me something was very wrong. I slowly turned back toward the attic door. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The attic door wasn't completely closed anymore. The small square panel in the ceiling was hanging open. Just slightly. Maybe an inch. I was absolutely sure it had been shut earlier. But now there was a thin dark line where the attic space showed through. And as I stood there staring at it, the panel moved. Very slowly. It creaked open just a little bit more. From the inside. Like someone was pushing it down. The attic door moved just enough to make the wooden frame creak. I felt every muscle in my body lock up. For a moment, I honestly couldn't move. I just stood there in the hallway staring up at that small dark gap in the ceiling. The attic door was open maybe 2 inches now, just enough for darkness to spill through. And just enough for something or someone to be standing right above it. I slowly took a step backward. My phone was still in my hand, and the flashlight beam was shaking as my hand trembled. The light hit the ceiling panel, illuminating the thin crack where the attic space was exposed. Nothing moved. No sound. Just silence. Then suddenly, a small piece of dust fell through the gap and drifted down toward the hallway floor. My stomach dropped. Something had shifted above the door. I backed up another step. "Hello?" I said again, my voice quieter now. Still nothing. The hallway felt colder somehow, like the air itself had changed. I forced myself to keep thinking logically. Maybe the latch was loose. Maybe the attic door just wasn't shut properly. That explanation sounded reasonable enough in my head. But there was one big problem with it. I had never opened that attic door before, not once. And neither had my parents recently. I knew that for a fact because my mom hated going up there and my dad only used it maybe once or twice a year. Which meant someone had opened it, recently. I stared at the panel again. It hadn't moved any farther, but the gap was still there, still dark, still watching. A horrible thought suddenly crossed my mind. What if whoever or whatever was up there could see me standing in the hallway, The idea made the back of my neck prickle. I slowly raised my phone, pointing the flashlight beam directly at the crack. The light disappeared into the darkness above. For a second, I thought I saw something move, but it might have just been shadows. I didn't wait to find out. I turned around and quickly walked back into my bedroom, closing the door behind me. Then I locked it. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to turn the lock. I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the door, trying to think, trying to breathe normally, but my mind kept replaying what I had just seen. The attic door opening, the breathing, the footsteps, and the dragging sound. A few minutes passed, or nothing happened. The house went completely silent again. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the door really had just been loose. Maybe the sounds were still animals after all. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A soft thump, directly above my room again, followed by slow footsteps. And this time, they stopped right above my bed. I held my breath, listening, waiting. Then I heard something slide across the floor above me. Something long, something heavy, and then 3 slow knocks, right above my head. Knock, 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 and a voice, very quiet, barely louder than a whisper. Hello? The whisper was so faint that for a second I thought I had imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. I sat frozen on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, my entire body stiff with fear. Someone had just spoken, from the attic, right above my room. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely hear anything else. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the floorboards above me creaked again. Slow footsteps. One, then another. They moved across the attic floor very carefully, like whoever was up there was trying to walk quietly. My throat felt dry. That was the moment when the reality finally hit me. This wasn't an animal. There was a person in my attic, and they knew I was downstairs. My first instinct was to grab my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it when I picked it up from the bed. I unlocked the screen and immediately started searching for the number to the police. But before I could dial anything, I heard a sound that made my stomach twist. The footsteps stopped, right above my bedroom door. I stared at the door across the room. Then I heard the attic floor creak again. But this time the sound was moving away from my room, toward the hallway, toward the attic ladder. My chest tightened. The attic entrance was right outside my bedroom door. If the person in the attic opened that ladder, they would be in the hallway, on only a few feet away from me. I slid off the bed and moved quietly toward the door, trying not to make any noise. Every step felt painfully loud. When I reached the door, I pressed my ear against it. The house was silent again. For a moment, I thought maybe they had stopped moving. Then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, right outside, above the hallway ceiling. Something heavy shifted across the attic floor. And then, the sound of wood slowly creaking. The attic door opening. I stepped back from the door immediately. My entire body was shaking now. I didn't want to imagine what was happening on the other side of that wall. But my mind did it anyway. The ladder unfolding. The dark attic opening. Someone climbing down into the hallway. The creaking continued for a few seconds. Then it stopped. Complete silence. I stared at my bedroom door, barely breathing. Seconds passed. Then a shadow appeared under the small gap at the bottom of the door. Something was standing in the hallway, right outside my room, completely still, waiting. And then the doorknob slowly started to turn. The whisper was so faint that for a second, I thought I had imagined it. But I knew I hadn't. I sat frozen on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, my entire body stiff with fear. Someone had just spoken, from the attic, right above my room. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely hear anything else. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the floorboards above me creaked again. Slow footsteps. One, then another. They moved across the attic floor very carefully, like whoever was up there was trying to walk quietly. My throat felt dry. That was the moment when the reality finally hit me. This wasn't an animal. There was a person in my attic, and they knew I was downstairs. My first instinct was to grab my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it when I picked it up from the bed. I unlocked the screen and immediately started searching for the number to the police. But before I could dial anything, I heard a sound that made my stomach twist. The footsteps stopped, right above my bedroom door. I stared at the door across the room. Then I heard the attic floor creak again. But this time the sound was moving away from my room, toward the hallway, toward the attic ladder. My chest tightened. The attic entrance was right outside my bedroom door. If the person in the attic opened that ladder, they would be in the hallway, and only a few feet away from me. I slid off the bed and moved quietly toward the door, trying not to make any noise. Every step felt painfully loud. When I reached the door, I pressed my ear against it. The house was silent again. For a moment, I thought maybe they had stopped moving. Then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, right outside, above the hallway ceiling. Something heavy shifted across the attic floor. And then, the sound of wood slowly creaking. The attic door opening. So I stepped back from the door immediately. My entire body was shaking now. I didn't want to imagine what was happening on the other side of that wall, but my mind did it anyway. The ladder unfolding, the dark attic opening, someone climbing down into the hallway. The creaking continued for a few seconds, then it stopped. Complete silence. I stared at my bedroom door, barely breathing. Seconds passed. Then a shadow appeared under the small gap at the bottom of the door. Something was standing in the hallway, right outside my room, completely still, waiting. And then the doorknob slowly started to turn. The crash downstairs echoed through the entire house. It sounded like something heavy had been knocked over in the kitchen. I jumped when it happened, nearly dropping my phone. "What was that?" the operator asked immediately. "I think he's downstairs," I whispered. My voice was shaking now. I could barely keep my breathing steady. For a few seconds after the crash, everything went silent again. Then I heard movement below me, cabinet doors opening, on something being pushed across the counter, glass clinking together. It sounded like whoever was in the house was searching for something, or maybe just making noise. The operator kept speaking calmly. "Sarah, the officers are less than a minute away. Stay in your room and do not open the door." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. My eyes stayed locked on the bedroom door. I kept expecting the doorknob to start turning again. But it didn't. Instead, I heard something much worse, on footsteps, coming back upstairs. Slow, heavy, one step at a time. The staircase creaked loudly with each movement. My chest tightened. "He's coming back up," I whispered into the phone. The operator didn't panic. "Okay, stay calm. The officers are arriving right now." The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then the hallway floor creaked. Closer, closer, until they stopped right outside my bedroom door again. The shadow returned under the door, and the house went completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then the doorknob moved again. This time it rattled violently. The person on the other side tried twisting it again and again, harder than before. The door shook. The lock strained but held. Then suddenly, bright flashing lights flooded through my bedroom window. Red, blue. Police sirens screamed outside the house. The doorknob instantly stopped moving. For a second, there was complete silence. Then I heard fast footsteps in the hallway, running, not toward my door, toward the attic ladder. Wood creaked loudly above the ceiling again. The attic door slammed shut. By the time the police kicked open the front door downstairs, the person in my attic had already disappeared. They searched the entire house, the attic, the yard, the street. But they never found anyone. What they did find was worse. In the attic, hidden behind old boxes, they discovered a small sleeping area. A thin mattress, empty food wrappers, water bottles, and a flashlight. Someone had been living up there, for who knows how long. But the part that still keeps me awake at night is what the officer told me before they left. He said the dust in the attic showed clear footprints, And those footprints led to one place, right above my bedroom, where someone had been standing, listening to me sleep.